Welcome to Think Outside the Board. If it's your first time here, just a big welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. So this is called the Kickstarter Weekly. It is a weekly video that I do in which I profile all the games that are funding during that weekly period that I think you might want to back and you should know about. It's sort of a last minute catch-all. Have you seen this? Have you backed this? Now, this week's episode is for the period October 18th to the 24th. That means it's going to include any games funding in that period. There are 4 games in this episode. 3 of them are actually funding on the 18th. And I'm playing a little bit of catch-up since I was vacationing in the Redwoods last week for my fiancée Kristen's birthday and our anniversary, which means that this is coming out a little bit late, and I am recording it on Sunday. 3 of the games funding tomorrow. Hopefully I'll be able to get it edited and posted tonight before those games actually fund. So that's a good reason to subscribe and hit the alarm bell. That way you can always be notified whenever I publish videos in the future, even if they're last minute like this week. I'm also going to briefly talk to you about the one game that I personally pledged from last week's video, as well as the one game that arrived that I acquired during this week. So without further ado, let's get to the 4 games that are funding this period. And we're going to kick things off with Keep the Heroes Out, which is one of the 3 games that is funding on Monday, October the 18th. Now, they started with a minimum required funding goal of $10,000. They're currently sitting at $420,000, which is about 42 times that minimum required funding goal. That's amazing. Keep the Heroes Out is a game for 1 to 4 players. It's going to play in about 40 to 50 minutes. It looks like the complexity on this game is medium light, and we're going to set the risk at medium high. Now, this is essentially a tower defense game where players are playing monsters defending their treasures from onslaughts of heroes. So it's kind of a reverse of the normal game. The heroes are trying to get the treasure, as they normally do in fantasy settings, and the players, as monsters, are trying to defend their treasure and stop those hero hordes. It's also got deck building and worker placement mechanics in it. Now, this game is designed by Louis Brouet, who has previously designed Covil the Dark Overlords, Dwarves Fall, and Dwarves Winter. He also illustrates a lot of his own work. So he is the illustrator on this one as well, the artist. And as an artist, he has previously worked on Dwarves Fall, Dwarves Winter, and Nomopolis. He's also a publisher. So he's publishing this game, and his highest rated games as a publisher are Night Parade of 100 Yokai and Volknut. Now, you've only got 1 pledge level on this game. It is $50, and just as a reminder, I don't include shipping when I'm talking about the prices because they're different for every country. They're even different depending on where you are in the United States. So if you're in Alaska, Hawaii, or Puerto Rico, your shipping is going to be higher than the continental United States. So wherever you live, you're going to need to take a look at the shipping and then add that on top of what I'm talking about. I also live in the US, so when I'm talking about the pledge levels, those are in terms of US dollars. So the pledge level on this one is $50. It's called Keep the Heroes Out. There are a couple of add-ons that you might want to look at in this one because they're not a part of any pledge level. So for $15, you can add on something called the Dreamer God, and that is Cthulhu, basically. So you can play as Cthulhu, as one of the monsters defending their treasure hoard. And that'll be a little pack with meeples and things that allow you to play as Cthulhu. Also, for $30, you can add on something called Guildmaster's Revenge. That includes a whole bunch of meeples. And it allows one player to be the one in a 1 versus many mode. So that player would essentially use all of the meeples in that pack as their underlings. They're kind of like a dungeon master role with underlings who will be kind of orchestrating an attack against all of the other players. So $30, 1 versus many mode. And finally, Keep the Heroes Out is aiming to deliver in August of 2022. From there, we go to the Stefan Feld collection, New York City and Marrakesh. Now, this is one in a series of Kickstarters. Queen Games is basically updating some old Stefan Feld games He's redesigning some of them. He's also throwing some new games into the mix. There was a campaign previously that was for Hamburg and Amsterdam, and those two games were essentially redesigns of Bruges and Macau. Now, in this campaign, we've got New York City, which is a redesign of Rialto, and Marrakesh, which is a new game. This campaign will also fund on October the 18th. They had a minimum required funding goal of $25,000. They're currently sitting at $242,000, which is just under about 10 times that minimum required funding goal. Now, both of these games are designed for 2 to 4 players. However, New York City is going to play in about 45 to 60 minutes, whereas Marrakesh is going to play in about 2 hours. Both of the games are in the medium range. I'd say they're probably kind of leaning into the medium-heavy range. And we're going to set the risk on this campaign at low because it's being published by Queen Games, which is a huge publisher. However, there have been some problems with Queen as a publisher. They tend to not publish the most highly produced games. So a lot of their games are kind of like these older, feels like a generation ago, just kind of cardboard type stuff. And they sometimes get slapped down for that, for just being uglier or with not as nice components as a lot of other games that are out there being produced. On the other hand, they're now doing deluxe versions of these games through this campaign, and they've also gotten dinged for that because they're very expensive. And on top of that, if you're a completist, all of the games have metal coin sets, and each metal coin set is very expensive. So if you're looking at sort of getting everything, including all of the metal coin sets, there is a very, very high sticker price on this campaign that is probably going to be more than what you want to pay. But we'll talk about different options when I get down into the pledge levels. So New York City, which is a redesign of Rialto, is kind of a city building game that uses card drafting as well as auction bidding. The other game, Marrakesh, is also going to have kind of a bidding element, but it's in relation to a cube tower. So players are going to be kind of bidding on what cubes they think are going to fall, and then they'll be able to use those cubes for various actions. And the actions that they can take are going to be dependent on the color of the cubes that they've drafted. Now, both games are designed by Stefan Feld, which I think that's obvious since it's called the Stefan Feld Collection, but it still needs to be mentioned. And the 5 games that Stefan Feld has designed that are the highest rated on BGG are Bora Bora, Bruges, the Castles of Burgundy, Notre Dame, and Trajan. And I'm a little unsure about the artists. The reason for that is on the first 2 games in the previous campaign, the first 2 games in this new Stefan Feld collection, they were both worked on by 2 artists, Christian Fior and Clemens Franz. As of now, Clemens Franz is the only credited artist for New York City, and there is no credited artist for Marrakesh. So I'm not sure if Clemens Franz is working on both of these games. I assume so. I assume they're wanting the same kind of art and look for all the games in the series. But I don't know if Christian Fior is also working on both of these games. So I'm just going to assume for now that Clemens Franz is doing the art on both New York City and Marrakesh, and that he's working on both alone. Although, as I said, I'm a little bit uncertain, so that's just what we're going with for now. Now, Clemens Franz is a huge artist in sort of Euro games, maybe one of the most prolific artists, I think, that's still kind of working today. He has worked on a lot of the big Uwe Rosenberg games. So his 5 highest rated games on Board Game Geek are Agricola, Cavern of the Cave Farmers, Clans of Caledonia, Le Havre, and Orléans. And then the publisher here is Queen Games, and their 5 highest rated games on BGG are Amerigo, Chicago Express, Fresco, Lancaster, and Shogun. All right, let's talk about all of the pledges because there are a lot. So first of all, you've got classic versions of all of the games in this campaign and deluxe versions. The classic versions are going to be what you would expect from Queen Games. So a lot of cardboard components, nothing really that blinged out. The deluxe versions are all going to come with a box sleeve, a game trays system, upgraded components. So some of them are wooden, some of them are acrylic, but they'll all be upgraded from the classic games cardboard components. And there are also some collectible items. So some other little things in the games that have been upgraded, like first player tokens, things like that. Now, the cheapest things that you can pledge are the classic editions. For the $74 pledge, you can get New York City Classic. Marrakesh is a little bit larger of a production, so it looks like it has a bigger box. And if you want to pledge just that game, the classic version, that's going to be $90. That's Marrakesh Classic. Now, if you didn't pledge the games in the previous campaign, you can get Amsterdam and Hamburg through this pledge, but if you're pledging them separately, you can only get the deluxe version. So there is no classic version for the two games that were available in the previous campaign if you're pledging them separately. So for a $125 pledge, you can pledge either one of the three following: Amsterdam Deluxe, New York City Deluxe, or Hamburg Deluxe. Because Marrakesh is a bigger game, that Deluxe also has a bigger price tag. So if you just want Marrakesh Deluxe, that's going to cost $149. Now, if you'd like to get both of the new games, but they're classic versions, so they're cardboard component versions, you want the $160 bundle, which is New York City and Marrakesh Classic. From there, there's a pledge for $185 called All New Add-ons. That, my friends, is basically just 4 metal coin sets, one for each of the games, as well as acrylic rondelles for Amsterdam. So in the first campaign, they just did normal wheels for Amsterdam. Now they're allowing you to get upgraded acrylic wheels for Amsterdam. And it's also available as an add-on. But if you're getting this kind of just the new stuff, it doesn't include any games, it just includes those 4 coin sets and the acrylic rondelles. Now, if you want all 4 games in the classic cardboard version, there's a bundle for $295. It's called the 4-game classic bundle. If you want the deluxe bundle for all 4 games, there's 2 versions of this. There's one that's just the games, and then there's another one with all of those kind of metal coin sets. Here's the thing on both of those. There are early bird versions of both pledges. And they're cheaper. They're about $25 cheaper. As of right now, which is the day before this funds, most of those early birds are still left. So if you're wanting to get either the deluxe bundle for all 4 games, because you didn't pledge the first campaign, or you're wanting to get all 4 games plus all of the coin sets, go for the early bird price. It's still available, and I have a feeling it will still be available right up until this campaign funds. So for $495, I know it's getting expensive, even without those coin sets. For $495, you can pledge the early bird 4-game deluxe bundle. It's going to give you all 4 games, the nicer deluxe sets. And again, there were originally 500 of these bundles available. There's like 475 that are still available. Now, if you want all those coin sets, you're going to want to pledge the $690 bundle. That is the early bird all-in 4-game deluxe bundle. It's going to include all 4 deluxe versions of the game, all 4 coin sets, the acrylic rondelles, and a 5th coin set called, in different places on this campaign, the City Collection coin set or the Stefan Feld Collection coin set. So I'm just going to throw this out to you that if you are getting a lot of these deluxe versions and you want a metal coin set, just pledge the Stefan Feld coin set as an add-on, and then just use that same coin set for all 4 games. I think pledging all 4 different coin sets so that you have one for each game is an enormous waste of money. However, if you have the money and you want to pledge it, go do you. But there is another option. You could go out and just get iron clays, which I think are fantastic for every game. But if you're looking at a kind of all-in-one solution through this campaign, just get that Stefan Feld or the City Collection coin set and use it for all 4 games. Now, there is a more expensive version for that early bird kind of all-in bundle. It's $715. That's $25 more than the early bird, but I don't think you're going to need it. I think up until funding, that early bird will still have copies left. So if you want to pledge any of those coin sets separately, they're all $39. And that includes that Stefan Feld collection coin set that I'm kind of recommending that people get as an add-on and just use it as a catch-all solution. That way you're paying $39 once instead of $39 times 4 or 5. Also, there are alternate card sets for both Hamburg and Amsterdam. Those are the 2 games that were available previously. And if you want to get those alternate cards, they are $12 for one and $14 for the other game. And then finally, if you want to get those nicer acrylic rondelles separately as an add-on, that is $49. So you can kind of mix and match depending on whether you want the classic versions, the deluxe versions, the acrylic rondelles, and some number of coin sets. And finally, Queen Games is looking to deliver New York City and Marrakesh, this part of the Stefan Feld collection, in May of 2022. From there, we're going to go to Voidfall, which is also funding on October the 18th. This is the third and final game funding on October the 18th. So they had a very high minimum required funding goal, $174,000. However, they're currently sitting at $1.5 million, which is just under 9 times that minimum required funding goal. This is a game for 1 to 4 players. It's supposed to play in 1.5 to 4 hours, so it is a longer game. It is also a heavy game. Very high complexity on this one. And the risk on this is low. It's published by Mindclash Games, which is, I think, my favorite publisher in existence. They're amazing. Their games are amazing, and the production quality for Mindclash, I don't think it's matched anywhere in this industry. Maybe Chip Theory Games. So this game, Voidfall, is a space-themed Euro and 4X game. And if you don't know what a 4X game is, that is explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate. And there are a lot of games that use this. Twilight Imperium, Eclipse, those are 2 pretty famous and well-known games. And what that means is in a game, you're going to be doing 4 different big things. The first thing is exploring. So you're going to be going out, usually uncovering tiles, kind of revealing more of the world and exploring the board, the modular board, the area. You're also going to be expanding, which means that you're going to be building your own personal structures in this world, in these territories that you're opening up. So you're exploring it, and you're also kind of establishing a physical presence, usually building structures of some kind. Then you're going to be exploiting it. What that means is you'll be using places where you have presence to generate resources for yourself. So usually there's some kind of a battle going on to maintain, area majority and the ability to acquire those resources, which brings us to the final X, which is exterminate, and that is combat. Now, sometimes gamers who don't like a lot of direct conflict and things like that don't like 4X games because of the exterminate X. And sometimes those gamers will be looking for a 3X game or a 3.5X game, which is kind of a 4X game without the combat, without the extermination. However, this game is a normal 4X game and has extermination. And personally, I love these games. I think they're amazing. But the other thing is with this one is because it's by Mindclash and it's designed by its designers, who I'll talk about in a moment, it's going to have a very, very deep, chunky Euro game element to it as well. So it's not just a very easy, simple 4X game. If you are looking for that, you might want to take a look at a game called Fractal, which is also out. And I will be profiling that in next week's Kickstarter Weekly. But that is a simpler game, I think, mechanically. This one's got a lot more going on with it. Now, the designers on this, there's a pair of them, Nigel Buckle and David Turksey. They recently worked together on Imperium Classics and Imperium Legends. Those games are amazing. They're really, really good. They came out this year. They're kind of civilization, deck building games. They're great. So I am sort of hugely anticipating Voidfall because I like the designers. They've made other games that I love. The artist working on this is one of my favorite artists, and the publisher is probably my favorite publisher. So let's just quickly go over these stats for these creative entities involved here. So the first designer is Nigel Buckle. He has previously worked on Imperium Classics, Imperium Legends, and a game called Omega Centauri. The other designer, David Turksey, has more games that are high rated at Board Game Geek, and his output includes Anachrony, Imperium Classics, Kitchen Rush, and Tekenyu, Obelisk of the Sun. Now, the artist on this game is Ian O'Toole, perhaps my very favorite artists in all board games. You may know him from a lot of the Vital Lacerda games. And his 5 highest rated games at Board Game Geek include Age of Steam, The Gallerist, Lisboa, On Mars, and Venus Deluxe Edition. See, a lot of Vital Lacerda games. And finally, the publisher here, Mind Clash Games, their highest rated games include Anachrony, Cerebria the Inside World, and Tricarian Legends of Illusion. Now, despite the fact that Mind Clash Game produces great games, and usually they have some really fantastic blingy editions, they don't glut things with a lot of different pledge levels. So you only have 2 different pledge levels on this game. The first is for $87. It is called the Standard Box, and it is essentially the non-deluxe version of the game. If you want the blinged out version, that's $157. It's called the Galactic Box, and that is going to add in 116 different miniatures, 16 painted metal tokens that will replace cardboard tokens, triple layer boards, and a modular tray system, kind of like game trays, but not game trays. And then finally, Mind Clash Games is aiming to deliver Voidfall in February of 2023. So it is a ways off, but just know that it's 2023, not 2022. And that brings us to our final currently running Kickstarter for this week's episode, and that is the Stuff of Legend. The Stuff of Legend is going to fund on October the 21st. They had a minimum required funding goal of $50,000. They're currently sitting at $231,000, which is about 4.5 times that minimum required funding goal. Now, this is a game for 3 to 6 players, so I feel like I need to say that again, 3 to 6 players. So there's no solo mode, and you also can't play it at 2 players. It plays in about 1 to 2 hours. I'm looking at the Stuff of Legend and thinking it's going to end up landing in the medium light zone. And we're going to put the risk on this one at high because the publisher has only made, I think, 2 other games and only run 1 Kickstarter. It was for a much smaller game. Now, an interesting thing to note here is that this is an IP that has existed before this game. There was a comic book series made, and the publisher here also published the comic book. So the publisher actually, I think, started with comic books, and now they're kind of moving into board games. And so this 3rd board game of theirs is using the same content as one of their comic books. But you may know the theme, the Stuff of Legend, from the comic book and the artist's other work that's out there. And thematically, it's kind of like Toy Story, but it's much darker. It's got a much darker element to it. And to give you some idea, Disney at one point was going to produce a movie version, and at another point, they were looking at the writers of Saw to work on a series version. So that's kind of the cross section we're looking at, Disney and Saw. Somewhere in the middle there is the Stuff of Legend. And it is a deduction game as well as an exploration game, and there's also a trader element to it. So normally with trader games and deduction games, those usually don't play with 2 players because you obviously know if you're not the trader, then the other person is. And deduction games, I think, also work in general better with more than 2 players. They tend to get way too boxed in with just 2 players. So that's why the player count for this is 3 and up. So the designer on the Stuff of Legend is Kevin Wilson, and he's been around the board game industry for a long time. He has worked on Arkham Horror 3rd Edition, Cosmic Encounter, Descent Journeys in the Dark 2nd Edition, Fury of Dracula 3rd/4th editions, and Sid Meier's Civilization the board game. And the artist here is Charles Paul Wilson III. I don't think that he is any relation to Kevin Wilson, but he is the artist who is responsible for the comics and all that. So this is kind of his world, the thing that he created. And so he is also doing the art on the board game, or they're using his art for the board game. But either way, it is the art from the original artist creator. And then the publisher, Third World Studios, the only 2 games that they have produced previously that are actually ranked on Board Game Geek are Arcane Academy and Charmed and Dangerous, the Sisters Grimm base set. So there are a few other pledges I'm not going to bother with on this one because they're aimed for kind of group pledges and retailers. So if you're just a single consumer, you're only going to really be looking at 2 pledges. The first is $70. It is called the Retail Edition. It is going to be the more basic version of the game. For $99, you can pledge the Boogeyman Edition. That's going to be the blinged out version. And much like Voidfall, it's going to include a box sleeve, miniatures, resin tokens instead of cardboard tokens, a metal coin, I think they're throwing in the latest printing of the very first issue of the comic book that the game is based on. And then there's additional stretch goals that are kind of relevant to this version, probably the miniatures and the metal tokens and things. There are additional stretch goals that will only be relevant to that edition, and that's often the case. If you pledge like a cardboard version, the stretch goals that you get will only be for that cardboard version. And if there are stretch goals tied into kind of miniatures and metal tokens and things like that, upgraded stuff, you will also get those additional stretch goals only when you pledge that nicer blinged out edition. And in this case, that's the $99 Boogeyman edition. Finally, Third World Studios is intending to deliver the Stuff of Legend in June of 2022. So that wraps the 4 games that we've looked at this video for currently running Kickstarters for this funding period. And now I'm going to talk to you quickly about the only game that I personally pledged from last week's Kickstarter Weekly. And that is Threetale. Threetale is essentially a cooperative miniatures exploration storytelling game. If you want to learn a little bit more about it, you can kind of go back and check out last week's video. But I love these games. I kind of say this over and over on this channel just to let everybody know what games that I like, because I think if you know what I kind of am predisposed to, it'll help you determine, where your tastes align with mine, and then kind of how well I can be representative for you. So as a gamer, I tend to go for heavy Euros and storytelling, kind of dungeon crawler, narrative themed games. And Threetale really appealed to me on that level. I also am planning on eventually launching a Twitch channel, and this seems like a great game, this kind of campaign narrative game that I'll eventually be able to feature on the Twitch channel. So I'm very excited for Threetale. That was the one game that I pledged from last week's video. The one game that I've acquired in the last week is a Kickstarter that arrived, and that is Dinosaur World. Now, I've played Dinosaur Island a few times. I enjoy it a lot. And I think the more time goes on, the more I kind of consider getting Dinosaur Island. However, I don't think Dinosaur Island does really anything to advance the genre, the kind of worker placement genre. It's also really big on the table. It is a table hog. And as a completist, if I get Dinosaur Island, I want to get the nicest version. So I would want to get all the bling. And right now, because there's kind of been so much done to Dinosaur Island, the blinged out version of the game is not cheap. So it's expensive, takes up a lot of table space. While I enjoy it, I think it's super fiddly, like its tracks and things like that. And there's just kind of a lot of fiddly mechanics. I enjoy it. There's just a lot going on for what it is. And I don't think it's as complex as the games that I really love, but there's just kind of a lot to manage, a lot of table space. Also, the metal coins for Dinosaur Island, I think are dangerous. They're almost so chunky that they can do table damage. So all of these things together have kind of kept me from acquiring Dinosaur Island, even though I like the game and I enjoy it whenever I play it. And then I thought in this game, Dinosaur World here is really like a redesign of Dinosaur Island, a re-implementation. And they've simplified it in some ways, and it just seemed like this was a really good game for me to pledge and take a look at. I did not pledge the Roar and Write game. The campaign that this one was for had sort of 2 games. There was Dinosaur World, which allows you to drive around in vehicles, and it kind of changes the mechanics of Dinosaur Island. I think it's smaller on the table. I think it's got less going on just in terms of the bulk and the fiddliness of it, but it looks like it may be a little bit more of a complex game. So fewer mechanics, but potentially more complex mechanics. And those are all things that I like. So I did back Dinosaur World in that campaign. However, I passed on the Roll and Write game, which was called Roar and Write. I actually have it sitting over on my table right now because it just arrived. I'm probably going to do a little post of it later just to say, hey, this arrived. And I'm looking forward to playing it a lot. My fiance loves Jurassic Park, and she's never played Dinosaur Island. So I think she's really going to like Dinosaur World. And I'd like to get the game to the table soon. But I have other things that I need to play for the channel, which I'm going to be talking about in just a moment. In fact, let's just jump into that now. It's the What's Coming section. Okay, so this last week, I was actually on vacation for most of the week in the Redwoods, sort of a birthday celebration for my fiance Kristen, as well as an anniversary celebration. So I've been kind of catching up on work now that I'm back. I had a bunch of videos published the previous week, but this past week has kind of been radio silent as I've been out of town. And then when I did get back on Thursday night, I was too tired to do anything. And then Friday and Saturday, I had to spend playing catch up on the website. Now, I also run a website called thinkoutside-the-board.com. I do daily posts on all of the Kickstarters that launched the previous day. I also used to do columns on recommended Kickstarters, but essentially those posts have been rolled into these Kickstarter weekly videos. But if you want to keep up with everything that premieres daily, you can go to my website, you can see those posts, and then you can use that with these videos as kind of like a two-structure system to help you determine what you might want to back. Also, before I went away, I did record and start to edit my August games of the month. But I'm going to kind of table the editing on that just in time to get this shot and edited, because this needs to get up first, since 3 of the games that I've talked about are all funding tomorrow. But I think on Monday you will also see the publication of that August Games of the Month video. Now, over the rest of the week, I intend to publish a first impressions video on Embarcadero, a first impressions video on Kemet Blood and Sand, and a teach and review on Chronicles of Crime 1400. Then at the end of this week, you will get another Kickstarter weekly, and that one's going to be big. My last few have only, I think, profiled 3 or 4 games. I don't have my list whittled down for next week, but I know I'm looking at like 12 or 15 different games. Probably not all of those games will make the final cut, but we're probably going to be looking at least double the number of games that I've kind of been profiling the last couple weeks. So probably at least 8 to 10 games next week. Now, if I have any time left after those 4 videos, I will probably do my September Games of the Month video. But the following week is going to be another almost radio silent week for me, because my parents are going to be visiting from out of town. And I haven't seen them in 2 years. They're thinking they don't really want to be traveling during Thanksgiving or Christmas. We have a new puppy this year, so we can't really travel, and we don't want to leave the new puppy alone this year. So basically, my holiday celebration with my parents is going to be next week, which means during that week, there will be less stuff going up. Now, on next week's Kickstarter weekly video, I will address that and kind of share what you can expect from me. But likely what will happen is that week's Kickstarter weekly will go up at the end of the week. And then any other videos that I'm thinking of doing, videos for things like maybe Coffee Traders or a teach and review for Chronicles of Crime 1900, maybe that September Game of the Month video, and possibly a first impressions video on Grand Austria Hotel with the new Let's Waltz expansions. All of those things are probably more likely to publish that following week, but I will address that in next week's Kickstarter Weekly in the What's Coming section. But just to give you a little bit of a heads up that I will be actively working on the channel this week and publishing a bunch of videos, and then the following week maybe a bit quieter again. So if you like this video, if you're still watching, now that we're at the end of it, if it was helpful for you in some way and you haven't already done it, please consider liking and subscribing down below. Also, any games that I've been talking about that are currently running that you are finding you may want to go look at and possibly back, you can just go down into the information section down there. There's a link. You can just click on that. That will pop you right over to the campaign. So thank you very much for spending some time listening to me and my thoughts. I hope you've had a great weekend and are looking forward to a fun week. Remember to play as many great games as you can. I will see you very soon in several more videos coming out later this week. Take care, and remember to be awesome to each other always.